Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Tuesday EasyPower refresher webinar. My name is Jim Chastain. I'm an applications engineer with EasyPower. And thank you very much for joining us today. The topic today is EasyPower tips and tricks. And so for the most part, we're not talking about technical analysis or any heavy-duty technical parameters of the software. Primarily, we're looking at some of the features that are sometimes overlooked or sometimes added without a lot of fanfare, but the intent is to make it more adaptable to the end user's workflow and thereby make the combination more productive in the long run. And so these will be covered in general categories: EasyControls, which actually are relatively new in the last 3 or 4 years. Custom data blocks, which has only been introduced in the last year. And then some improvements or modifications to the global settings. And in some cases, I just want to point to where they are because I can't predict how best your workflow would be accommodating. So with that in mind, hopefully it'll be productive. And a lot of this is driven by comments I get back as we do live workshops. EasyPower tool owners of several years may attend, and they will comment that they are seeing things that they didn't realize the tools did, or they hadn't been aware of that feature being added to the tools. First, as always, we like to start off with a couple poll questions. And the first, just get some feedback from the audience. Obviously, there's no obligation. But the first question is, do you include panel schedules on drawings you provide your customers? And this is basically one of those workflow or deliverable discussions. And that may or may not be something that's important, but I would appreciate a little bit of feedback as we're kind of getting into this. Not going to spend a lot of time on it. So it looks like we have a quorum voting here. Let's go ahead and share the results. And it looks like it's kind of a mixed bag, which I appreciate the feedback. And then the second one is, do you use custom data blocks? And again, this is a feature that's been relatively recently added, and that's one of the reasons it's included in this presentation. And I'm happy that you're joining us today so we can expose you to some of this. So looks like we have close to a quorum. Sounds good. Thank you for participating. Here's how folks have weighed in on this. And good to know. All right, so thank you very much for participating, and let's jump into it. So first thing I want to touch on is the ability to customize the desktop environment itself. And frequently I will visit customers, and they have taken extreme advantage of some of these features, and I marvel at how well this helps their particular workflow, which is one of the reasons I wanted to share it. So let me jump out of this into EasyPower, and we can kind of talk about some of this. So what we're talking about is the look of the desktop itself. And these include a menu bar and a ribbon, and then some style settings over here on the far right top row. So I'm at the very top, and we can customize the quick access toolbar, which is what this little line that's at the very top refers to. We can either add more commands if we so desire to make more features accessible from that point. We can move this little quick access below the ribbon, So now it's here, and then at the same time, I'm sorry, we minimize the ribbon first, and then we can move it below the ribbon. So now the quick access is below the ribbon while the ribbon's minimized. So all that's from this little quick access control sheet. And I'm going to put this back to the top. So this is the ribbon that can be minimized and not. Now it's worth noting, when you minimize the ribbon, there's nothing wrong with that, but now it's going to, as I go to different elements, it's going to hide it, and I have to go back up to my menu tab to be able to recover what that ribbon access or ribbon location is. So be aware that that could be a possibility. Then, as far as style, on the right-hand top corner, there's a color combination, and some people do better with different color as far as their personal preference, and so that gives you some options to play with there. Now, another one, and this is one that's been added just recently. When I go to a project, and I'm in database edit right now, you can see I have this little indication of a tab that appears above the drawing. If I right click and go to options, that's controlled by these tab options. I'm under the general tab for my options menu. On the right hand side towards the middle of the page, I can control that. If it says none, then that little indication goes away. If I say above, top rather, it shows up. All right, and again, this will be it's an indication of what windows I have open. So it's the same list that I would get if I were pulling down windows. Or I can put it at the bottom. And so now as we apply that list of windows that are open will show up here. And if I want to make them colored, if I show color tabs and apply it, then now it gives me a different color. And as I go into analysis and create reports, again, this will reflect the same list that's under my window list here. So again, that's been recently added, and a lot of people seem to favor it, and it's available under database edit, right click options, and it's this tab location, tab color mark. Okay, a couple other things that are available under the global access, and again in database, if I right click, if for whatever reason I'm not showing the equipment palette, I need to check this box. If I don't check it, it's now going to be available. So this puts it on the screen, the equipment palette. Same thing with the media gallery. The media gallery refers to a file that's available with this particular project with pictures that I've associated with different elements. For instance, if I come back here to my transformer and look at the collected data file, I might want to associate a picture with this particular transformer, and so I would do it by adding it from some location to a camera stick or a phone or wherever I got the picture. For instance, if I wanted to add I go up to the top here where my pictures are stored. And now, so let's say I wanted to add this particular picture. Now, as I do that, it associates it in my media gallery, and I can access it or expand it, and now it will be added to my media gallery for this particular project. And so that's what we just did there. And so that's reflective of total file. I can share the DEZ file without this, but if I want these pictures attached, I need to share the media folder that's also created under the same name. All right, so that's the media file, the media gallery, and that's on my options. And then finally, EasyControls, you can either include them and lock them in, or auto hide or not. So I think that's probably everybody is familiar with that stuff. Okay, next thing I want to talk about, and again, I think we'll have time for questions at the tail end, so be sure to jump in. I've found that it's extremely valuable to utilize some of the EasyControls and named views for more than just the aesthetic construction of my one line. And what I mean by this is that there may be some features that are useful to me that aren't necessarily something that I need to construct for presentation to the client. And so let me kind of jump into this and we'll talk about what I mean by that. So I'm going to go out and find my So the question comes up often, how do you deal with a very large system, in this case a college campus, where you may have, in this case, a ring bus, and then a number of elements that I want to keep out separate from at the low voltage part of the system, and I don't want to mess everything up and make it look like a ball of spaghetti. Well, the one-line diagram itself, if I use this expand out to full, the one-line diagram includes a very large frame of reference. And so and I accredit this to our friends at the University of Wyoming, which came up with this scheme. I've created my ring bus, and then as I populate each building, I have a special pane. For instance, this one, I'm going to activate this. So as I populate this scheme for the mailer hall, I could go ahead and build out my system for whatever elements are going to be included there. I select it, and then I drag it down to my mailer hall location. And now when I zoom in, it's going to be there. Now as I populate the data for these elements, the cable itself is, let's say, it can be 3 conductors, 750 kCmIL, which is all normal, but the thing I want to do is I don't want to show the entire line, so I want the tools to stub off my cable in this case, and so now I see where it's tied into the ring bus, but it's still on a separate location that can be isolated. Now that I've done this, I want to save this pan and zoom settings, and so I do that under name view, and I'm going to call this under a new name view mailer hall. And now as I just select the name view, it'll jump around my one line without having to do a lot of scrolling. All right, now likewise, and I'm going to go back and deactivate that so it won't interfere with my calculations here. Now likewise, I can create drawings that once I've isolated on a particular system and I want to put in, let's say, panels, I can do so just by selecting the section of the one line that I need to generate a new drawing for, create the drawing, and then from here I can insert the panel, select the panel, right click, the schedule, and insert the schedule. and then place it wherever it belongs in my orientation. Okay, so that's how to insert schedules. Now the good news is this is still part of the one-line diagram. So as I make changes in the one-line diagram, it'll be reflected in the drawings I've created. Now that brings me to another comment, and that is there may be times I want to create excuse me, special drawings that I don't necessarily need for a client or a customer. I need them for my own analysis to make things easier for my part. So let me jump out of this. And this frequently comes up, at least for me, where I'm trying to look at a very large one line. In this case, we're going to go to our start page. There he is. Pick up a file that exists. And so I want to be able to see parts of this one line with a specific focus during analysis. And so the tool allows me to pick up, let's say, the utility. Let's say I'm adding a motor, or I'm exercising a motor, or trying to decide either power flow correction, power factor correction, or the effects of a VFD drive. And so I might select, let's say, look at the utility and the bus that I'm considering making changes on, and I'm going to create a new drawing. And as I do that, it says, well, you know, Jim, this is too big for this page. Well, I knew that, and I can scroll out, and there's literally no limit to what can be collected onto one drawing. In this case, I just want to pull up this one subsystem, and now, because I'm still part of the one line, I can go into my power flow and I can solve. And what I'm looking for now is the effect on my utility by including in this case, bringing a motor online or offline, and whether or not it's affecting my real or reactive power. Now, as I go to make changes, I need to do that on the one line. So let's go back and kind of talk about that for a second. Let's say in database edit, what I want to do is add a capacitor here, or at least check out the effects of adding a capacitor to this particular bus. So I'm going to put in a capacitor and a switch. And let's make this relatively small. And again, what I'm talking about is a what if, but in essence, I'm going to go to power flow. Let's go back to my drawing 6. And instead of real and reactive power on my one line, I want to look at the MVA and power factor. So now I'm in power flow. As I solve the equations, I can see I have a point. Now this actually brings up a good point, and that is because I added the capacitor on the main one line, I need to create this drawing again. So I'm going to go back to my main one line, select my new devices, and it says, yep, it's too big. Scroll out. So that's a good lesson learned. Now go back to power factor and solve. And now I can see the effect of adding that capacitor on my power factor correction. Okay, you get the idea. The point is I can bring up very large drawings and then isolate on remote devices that have an interaction with each other, but may be graphically far removed from each other on the the big one-line diagram. So I find this useful a lot, both in doing short circuit analysis when we're looking at coordination or we're looking at the sources of fault current, and especially in power flow. All right. The next, so that was my EasyControls and named views. Now, this is a feature, custom data blocks is a feature that's been added in the last year, and it was asked for frequently by the tool owners. And one of the things that strikes me, because I do a lot of tutorials and a lot of examples, that there are times and I want certain display data blocks to be different from other times. So what that means is, if I'm in database edit, here my cable shows the size, length, and material, but as I'm constructing an example, I'd like to see what the ampacity is as I'm adding different cables. Now that comes up in my calculation method. It shows me the ampacity, but I'd like to see it on the one line for my own purposes. If I go into an open area, right click, go to options, and go to one line text, we have the ability to customize the text for every element in the system, any element. Now normally, when I just boot up, it uses a template that's installed with the tool, and I don't necessarily want to overwrite it. So what I want to do is export a different one and then use it on demand. Specifically, I want to customize the cable contents, so you can see any type of device could be modified. But in terms of the cable, these are all the different sections of the database that are available in that display. So in my case, what I want is not necessarily all of this. What I want is my ampacity. Well, over here is on the slider is all the access to the data that's available for a cable. And I'm specifically looking for amps, and it's this little puppy right here. So if I right click and pull it out here, it'll put it in this block for me. And then I want to type in amps just so I can tell what's going on. Now as I do this, it shows me a preview of what's going to happen on my one line based upon the information that's in these data blocks already. So this is just the example field. Now, if I like this, I'm going to apply it. When I come back here, now I see my cables now show the ampacity for each one, and it's not something I would, like I say, would necessarily pass along to the drafts person or anybody else. So I would not necessarily want this to be the display that's provided to the customer. So if I go back to my ampacity, all right, so this is the one I want. I want to export this to a file, and I'm going to call it Jim's Cable. And so as I do that, it'll have those. The normal file that's included on default is a text template, and so normally I would call that up, and it would show that information for the cables. So you can see when I bring in the text file that was default, it doesn't include it. If I go back to the text one line and import Jim's cables, it will have that. So again, that's something that can be used based upon the audience that I'm talking to. Frequently that may include or may not include clients. It may be internal that I want that information shared. Okay, so that's that example. And the last thing I wanted to cover was the global options. Now, this is something that I would doubt that a long-time user would have any issues with, but I want to make sure we share them, especially for any new people. And that is, if I right-click and database edit, right-click and go to options, there are, especially into this general tab, there are a number of checkboxes here. And for my purposes, I don't want some of these to be implemented because it obscures what I like to show when I'm doing demonstrations. For instance, I like to make sure people know what's being calculated when I change data, but in a normal flow of things, rather than have to calculate each step I do data entry, I could check this checkbox, and it would auto calculate for fields. Now, once I do that, once I change this setting, it doesn't necessarily auto calculate for something that's been entered prior to me making this checkbox. And so there is a feature that goes out and recalculates or re-verifies. I'll show you that in a second. All right, so what my recommendation is, go through each of these. If you don't understand what it's saying, go to the help folder, and there will be a description of what each of the checkbox is trying to get across. But by so doing and then saving the configuration, it will customize and potentially improve your workflow. Now, just the point I was trying to make, if I change that auto calculate, there is a verify one-line data integrity. This will go through and re-verify anything that hasn't been calculated. And if you make that change that I was just referring to, you may want to do this at least on the older drawings. All right. Anything else on? Right-click in an open area. These sometimes are, I guess probably the biggest one is include motor contribution. Just an overall word of advice, one of the requirements when you're doing a short circuit study or arc flash calculation, the recommendation from the IEEE standard is to include motor contribution and exclude motor contribution and see what makes a worst case. And so that's easily done with this checkbox here. And once I uncheck it, now when I go to short circuit focus, there will be no motor contribution included in the results. And you can see that by the fact that there's a 0 from all the downstream buses, loads. Okay. I think I'm having too much fun here, and I'm probably needing to wind this up. So we covered database edit, right-click options, general tab. I think that'll be all for today. Thanks for joining us. I appreciate your attendance, and by all means, if you've got questions, you're more than welcome to contact us. And I'll just see, we did have one question here. It says where the report is. Where's reports tab? Reports tab, so virtually every analytical module has its own reports tab, and this will be on the main menu ribbon. So let's kind of go back and talk about that. So if I'm in short circuit focus, it's going to have its short circuit reports, and under short circuit reports, that's a text output. And as I check these, that's going to create more of these windows that are referred to by these tabs and are listed. So if I say create a 30 cycle report and a voltage sensitivity report, and apply, those extra reports show up here, and they're also available on the list of windows. Likewise, if I go to another analytical module, and let's say coordination, its reports tab will be different altogether, but as I generate it, it will show up here on my tab. All right, any other questions, feel free to contact me, Jim at EasyPower.com. Thank you for attending, and we'll talk to you all in a week or so. Have a good day.